Hey guys, I just want to share with you some ideas of how to teach your children how to read an analog clock. The one thing that I think is quite funny is that a lot of times we try to teach children how to read clocks by giving them a worksheet that says, here's some clocks, this is where the hands are pointing, write down what is the time that you're seeing. However, one thing to keep in mind is that's only a quadrant 2 linear thought process part of the brain. So if your child doesn't resonate with that, it's going to be very difficult for them to master that skill. And guess what? It's so easy to integrate teaching time reading into everyday life. Whole embodied experiences that relate to children's context is the best way to learn and integrate learning into our lives for lifelong learning. So let's do that with a clock. So the first thing is make sure that you actually have an analog clock in your house that has the numbers and it has the little dashes to show it. So like this one here, it cost me a couple of dollars from, Kmart or IKEA or anything like that. But you see it actually has the numbers and it has the dashes so they can count the 60 minutes in the day. It's so important to actually have one like that. And I don't look at the digital clocks. I don't use my phone. I always put them back to looking at this clock. Now, the other thing is to say, Mum, what's the time? Instead of just looking at the clock and then telling them, say, okay, let's look at the clock and let's find out. So where's the shorthand? Just like they do in play school, really. Where's the shorthand? Okay, that's pointing at the 12, so we know it's o'clock. And then which one is the longhand pointing to? Yeah, that's almost to the 7, or that's just after the 6, so it's 6 o'clock. Okay, and they just go, okay, no worries, Mum, thank you, it's 6 o'clock. Then the next time they go, oh, excuse me, Mum, what time are we going to be going to the shops? And I might say, okay, well, let's look at the clock. We're going in half an hour. So that means that long hand needs to go halfway around the clock. So at the moment, it's pointing at the 1. If we were going to go halfway all the way to the other side, what would it be at? It would be at the 7, right? So that's going to be half an hour from now. So you can watch that. I do that even with my youngest, who is now 4, but even by the time that they were 2 or 3, I would explain to them about how long it's going to be before the hand goes around the clock to when we're going to go. So they're just constantly just gently and easily being integrated into when they can look at the clock, it's starting to make meaning. They don't have to understand the whole concept of reading the time at this point in their lives. However, you're just slowly giving that information that integrates into their question of where they are, and it's constantly giving that reminder of the way that the clocks work. And every time we do that, they're going to layer on top of that neurological pathway that meaning and develop a greater depth of understanding. My children, they're only, 4, 6, and 8 at the moment, and all of them can read analog clock. Then the other thing is when you're actually getting to the point where they are reading and understanding the time directly, what you can do is when they say, oh, Mum, what's the time? You can say, okay, so the shorthand counts what? It counts the hours, right? So which one is it pointing to? That's, oh, well, it's between the 4 and the 5. Okay, so it's not to the 5 yet, so it's 4 something. And then the longhand, where's that? It's pointing at the 9. Okay, so that one counts in 5s. Do you know what 9 times 5 is? And I go, that's 45. Great. Well, it's actually 4:45. Well done. And then if you find that they're in the dashes, you say, all right, so that's pointing just after the 9. So 9 times 5 is 45 plus what? Another 2 dashes. So it's probably 47. Well done. Now, they may not fully understand that and grasp that whole concept, but if you're constantly doing that every time they refer to time, it means that you're linking those important things into their life at the time that it's actually relevant. Whenever we can make learning experiences relevant to their personal purpose, their lives and their intention, that engages the quadrant 1 part of our brain where we identify with purpose and understanding of life. The quadrant 2, there you're giving them that content. Quadrant 3 is at that practical application. And then quadrant 4 is constantly just readapting the way that we're using that clock. The other way you can do, if you really want to mix it up and really get them to understand and play around with this, is actually get them to play with the clock and work out times. Make it a game. This is a very quadrant 3 practical exercise, and I also recommend, this is the way that teachers teach it in class, is every child gets a clock, have a little competition and say, all right, I want to see who's the first one who can put their clock on 1:15, go, right? Now, if they need to be real clocks, because you want the actual hands to move properly, not just, the play clocks, because what happens is, as we know, as adults, when we move the shorthand, the long hand starts to move as well, and they start to see how they work together. Once again, it's that real practical, mechanical part of the brain, the quadrant 3, that's going to resonate with that, and they're going to see, hey, I can see that other hand is moving when I'm moving this one, but it's moving at a faster pace, and they start to see how those things work together and they interrelate. Also, as a quadrant 4, remember the quadrant 4 part of the brain loves to reinvent. So maybe they can create something themselves. They'll probably already have an idea, because this part of the brain's very autonomous and likes to be able to have their own ideas and do things in a self-discovery mode. But they might be able to do things like create a clock that goes backwards, or maybe create their own kind of time machine, or, the old school timers, anything like that, where you're going to be able to reinvent the way we use time and see how they can use that in a different way. They're the kind of things where you're going to integrate those whole embodied experiences. But just back to the basics is just integrate that every time they say, Mum, what's the time? Or how long before we do this? Turn to the clock, use that analog clock, and explain it just short, so that they're constantly getting that reassurance. You might also find that if you happen to give them time out in their room, I'll also place a little clock and say, you can come out once that hand points to this number, which is 15 minutes or so forth, and get them to then be watching that time. Believe me, they watch time very closely when they're going to be able to come out of their room. So just some ideas of how to integrate learning how to learn time and understanding clocks into your everyday. But remember, the best way to learn is through play, whole embodied experiences that relate to our life. That's how I remember those great experiences that integrate into our neurology, and they stay there for the all time. So have a good day.